All right, good evening, everyone. TGT Media is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries, and of course, authors as well. And I'm your host, Kurt. We are joined today by a very talented author and writer who has had some fairly successful books, which you can find on Amazon. We're joined today by Harrison Paul, writer extraordinaire. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks.
Good to hear. Good friend of ours, Stephen Savage, put you on to my show. He's put a number of very talented authors, and you're another one along the list. So welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity.
And let's start off here because usually, just my battery dying. But that's fine. Usually, authors that come on the show, they're either of a certain genre. They either deal with history or fantasy or crime dramas and film noir type stuff. What are you into?
I've always been into epic stories about battles between good and evil, moral dilemmas, people making difficult decisions, the classic superhero dilemma of having great power but also great responsibility. And so I experimented with a lot of different genres when I was starting, but I realized what I love to write is the epic fantasy style and also science fiction. The more I've studied about science, the more fascinated I've become by the potential of science and scientific developments, technology, where the future is going, listening to authors like Kurzweil and Michio Kaku. But it's been fascinating. I'm primarily a fantasy author and a science fiction author. But for this series, I went into young adult because I wanted to. I've done a few young adult books before. I wanted to try something which was shorter, which was more compact, where I could just take a story, finish it in 70,000 words, 200 pages or so, and then have it episodic. So it's like you'll have one book which is about 200 pages, and that'll come to a conclusion of sorts. But then you'll have the same characters and setting and pick up in another book. And so I was going for an episodic feel. It almost feels like a movie trilogy. The series is planned at 7 books. But the whole idea behind it was that I wanted to introduce the world and the characters in the first book, have them go through a certain conflict, and then build on the characters throughout the series. Kind of like a serial drama. Something. I mean, I love shows like Community or Buffy the Vampire Slayer because they have very strong character focus and also very strong setting focus. The plot seems to be primarily centered around the characters interacting with the setting and with each other. There aren't, especially in Buffy or in some of the really great shows I've seen, a lot of the conflicts happen because of characters in the story, because of their personalities clashing, because of what they want, and how that gets them into trouble. Firefly, a lot of the Joss Whedon productions, I really enjoy Joss Whedon's work, and I think it's because he has that wonderful sense of character. He can create an interesting setting and put interesting characters in it, and then sparks fly. He sees what happens. And I tried to do the same thing with this series. I'm trying with my other series, which I'm pitching to agents and editors. But that's the whole idea. The whole idea for me is to create interesting characters and an interesting setting and let them play. Let them do what they would normally do and see what happens.
And that's great, actually, because we have to now actually say what series you're actually doing, because now I'll let you say it because I'm horrible with names as it is, and I'm probably going to butcher it by saying a pine tree or something like that.
So the series is called Kaybre the Angel Killer, and the first book is Kaybre versus the Angels. Book 2, My Very Own Witch Hunter, and Book 3, Girl of Fire and Lightning, are also out on Amazon. And the name Kaybre comes from my niece.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I was working on what's that?
I was like, you can't mess up that name.
Yeah. Yeah, I was working on the series at the time, and my sister was pregnant with her first daughter, her first child, and she said they were naming her Kaybre. And so I said, hey, I need a main character's name, so I'll name her after you, after your daughter. And she thought it was great. She hasn't read the books yet. Maybe I should wait until after she's read the books before she'll tell me if she likes the name or not.
depending on how you drag your character through the mud or anything. You know, being a creative writer that you are, this is usually not the genre, rather, that you normally start out with. Usually you're doing like high English or a takeoff of Shakespeare of some kind, in some way, shape, or form, in some Hyde Park somewhere. So what got you into creative writing?
That's a good question. I've always been into storytelling. I got into the Wheel of Time series when I was in ninth grade. I started reading that, and to give you some perspective on how that impacted me, I was really into the Final Fantasy series of video games and all the the Super NES RPGs of the 90s when I was in high school or when I was in middle school. And so I was really into video games, but I loved them for the story. And when I discovered the Wheel of Time and I realized I could have this immersive world and these great characters and this great story without having to fight the random battles, I was hooked. I gave up video games and picked up books. And so ever since, I've always wanted to write my own story. It wasn't until about 5.5 years ago that I really put my ideas into a book form. I'd just never done it before. Actually, on my mission, I served a mission for my church in Taiwan. And at the time, we have 1 day a week where we can sort of take a rest. And I would do these improv dramas called Strife the Mercenary. And it was like a mashup fan fiction type of thing where I'd take all my favorite characters and put them together, and I would act out all the parts. I'd do the fight scenes, and it was our entertainment as missionaries. We didn't go see movies. We watched me do this improv drama.
We got this crazy fool that's dancing around doing stuff. Let's laugh at him.
Yeah, and so I've always loved telling stories, but it wasn't until I don't think I developed a discipline for it until I became a songwriter. I learned how to sort of get the process down of writing songs, and then a couple years later, I started writing books, and that's the process that got me into writing. I've always loved reading. I've loved literature, but I wanted to tell stories, and so that's how I decided to get into it.
You know, with something like this, obviously your books are on Amazon, any other of the big online stores?
So I distribute through Smashwords as well,
okay.
which then distributes to Kobo, Sony, Barnes & Noble, Apple, and a number of other stores. So
these are fairly large, obviously worldwide reaching companies. Then the question is, are you going through these guys for your publishing, or how are you doing this? So
the way that self-publishing works for me is that I create the ebook. I have Scrivener, if you're familiar with that. It's a sort of the upgraded version of the word processor, and so you can. It's a writer's productivity program where you write and you can rearrange your chapters. It has a certain format that you can put your book in so that you can format it very quickly, and it even outputs files as .doc or as PDFs or as EPUBs or anything you want. And so Scrivener has been very helpful in helping me format the book. So I write it on Scrivener, and then I turn it into an EPUB file. I use Kindle Previewer to turn it into a Mobi file for the Kindle, and then I upload it on KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, which is a service they offer to self-published authors, it's primarily self-published authors. What you do is you upload the book, you decide on pricing, decide on cover art, things like that, and then you submit it to them, and they take, depending on the core price range, they take 30%, and that you take 70% of the sales. So it's a pretty good deal to get out to that Amazon market.
It really helps, in the day-to-day struggles of being a writer, a creative writer out there too, I'm sure. For the good of your writing for the next series, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Writing about angels, especially from writing about angels in general, obviously you can have many different takes on it, good versus evil, as you're writing about. Usually angels are attributed to being the forces of good. Are you saying your niece is like a force of evil?
Yeah, so the way the book came about was I've always loved, well, there are two elements that match together. One was Scandinavia. I've always loved the folklore, the setting. I live in sunny California, and so I long for the overcast, dark, Northern Europe kind of setting. I've always just thought those were cool settings. And so I've studied a lot about culture and people of Scandinavia. And then also, one of my all-time favorite anime shows is Neon Genesis Evangelion, if you're familiar with that. And the premise of the series is that you have these beings called angels. I believe in the Japanese, it's the literal translation would be apostle. But anyway, you have these beings that have this holy name, and they're attacking. And I felt that the series took it the concept in a different direction than I would have. They took it in a very fascinating human transcendent science fiction direction. And I thought, well, what if you took it in a strictly religious direction? What if you took the idea of angels attacking, but these people were people who were religious and who had venerated the angels in a previous era as being messengers of God. And so you have these messengers of God who typically would be forces of good, would be bringing revelations, or would be saving people, and they're forces of destruction. And so I wanted to give the characters a moral dilemma and have them question themselves, question their faith, wonder about why the angels would attack, and sort of uncover that oftentimes supernatural beings aren't exactly what they seem.
So do you question religion often?
So I'm a religious person, and I find it very interesting to go and to research. I'm a LDS Christian, Latter-day Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormon. And so I've studied a particular kind of Christianity all my life, but I'm also fascinated with studying world religions. I took a world religions course in college from this professor, Alonzo Gaskill, and the reason I took it is because he was just bouncing off the walls, sitting on the piano, really dynamic lecturer. But he also had a lot of really interesting insights about other religions and how oftentimes we in the Mormon community can be very have sort of these blinders, doctrinal blinders. We'll say, oh, the Hindus do this and that's so weird, and yet he would turn it back on us and say, well, you do this. That's pretty weird too. And so that really opened me up to understanding more about other religions, and I've really been fascinated by studying different religions, different cultures, different conceptions of God. And so I do speculate a lot. I have a lot of theological discussions with friends and family, trying to find commonalities, trying to understand how religion and culture and society mix and how they are connected, trying to understand what religion has to do with the future, what's the future of religion. So this is an interesting topic to me, and so because of that, I wanted to explore it in a fantasy setting.
And as for that's kind of interesting to put that type of those points of view, which is actually very, very interesting in terms of for young adults. I mean, you're going
right
from an age bracket of, I'm guessing, like age 8 to whatever.
Yeah, so this is more like an older young adult, maybe 13 to 18, and even into college. But yeah, my core target audience would be high school students.
Yeah, especially with religion is always religion, politics, and something else is whatever the big three is for what you don't talk about at dinner table. Yeah, I'm glad that you're taking this point of view, or you're showcasing different points of view based on religion that is actually could be construed in many different aspects, and that you're using it in a fantasy setting is even better. I think that's just an awesome take on it. Something that I haven't personally seen before myself.
Well, thanks. It's been an interesting journey writing the series. My big science fiction series deals a lot more with it's science fiction, so it is near future, alternate history. It deals a lot more with religious organizations, different world religions, and how they are contributing to the singularity and the apocalypse and how they converge. So in that one, I explore a lot more of the adult issues, or maybe that's the wrong word, maybe the more of the complicated highly speculative theological issues. In this series, I wanted it to be more like a journey of self-discovery. Kaybree, the main character, it's a first-person viewpoint from this teenage girl who stumbles into the middle of this big conflict. She has this power that she can fight the angels who are attacking them, but at the same time, she has to investigate. Why would holy beings attack us? Are we doing something wrong? Are these not really angels? What's going on here? Or have we been worshiping the wrong beings the whole time? And so I think that's an issue that a lot of teenagers will deal with. If they grow up in a community or a family that is very religious, or they interact with people who are very religious, eventually they may have to ask themselves, well, what do I believe? If they're coming from a very religious community, and I come from a very conservative religious family and community, you have to get to that point where you ask yourself, do I really believe it? And why do I believe it? And so I wanted to go through Kaybree's process of confronting it. And of course, it's in the midst of this epic conflict with battles and explosions. But I wanted to give it, this feel of her discovering new things. So she comes into it, and in book 1, the reader has a certain conception of the angels and the people and the sages and the different religious groups. And then book 2 and 3 and beyond, it sort of sheds a little more light each time on what's really going on. What are people's motivations? Why do people believe the way they do? And it's really interesting to me that people could be completely justified in their views and could have very good points and yet be completely on opposite sides. And so I wanted to do it in a young adult setting to make it accessible and to make it interesting for readers who are going through that same process themselves of discovering what religion means to them and discovering, as they discover more about the world, how that fits into their religious worldview.
So the aspect of fighting and religion, though, seem to go hand in hand. Sorry, Jude.
Of fighting angels. Oh.
Yeah, no.
You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I mean, in terms of, usually when you think religion, obviously in a fantasy setting you can turn it however you want to, but usually when it comes to religion, you don't usually have religion and fighting. Only in a real world setting do you seem to have religion and fighting.
So as in
turning it into a fantasy setting, though, usually everyone's looking for the rose-colored glasses and the happy endings and all that other stuff.
Oh, okay. As in a positive portrayal of religion, or are you saying that
more like the aspect of violence and religion, especially in a fantasy setting that you're writing? Mm-hmm. I mean, are you trying to portray a certain message, or is this just a necessary plot twist?
I think it's just a necessary part of the setting. There needs to be, because I wanted to make it this pre-modern setting, and there are religious organizations. They're the sages who are kind of the traditionalists. They have the angels' writings and the revelations from centuries before, and they've been strictly adhering to them for centuries, and they're the very orthodox side. Then you have the angels themselves, who, now that they're coming back, and the more that the main character has contacted with them, the more she realizes what they're saying is a little different from the sages. And there are differences, at least in perspective, between these supernatural beings and then the humans trying to interpret the will of God. And also you have her mother's organization, which is the Vormund Order. And this is an organization which is not supposed to be religious at all. It's kind of human knowledge putting together this organization that has a code of honor. And so I wanted to explore the differences between people who are affiliated with a traditionalist religion, people affiliated with a religion or a philosophy that is constantly being updated, or one that is not a religion at all. It's just a code of honor, a code of conduct. And so, let's see. Let me get back to your question. And so I wanted to portray a world where people generally do believe in religion, and then have them challenge that belief.
I think that's a good way to look at it. More positive in that way, rather than just questioning oneself is always a good thing to do, especially in life, no matter what age you're at. especially questioning one's beliefs can kind of lead you down some different paths that you may not have experienced.
Right. And I guess if there's a message, it's that you need to think before you judge. Oftentimes things aren't what they seem. And the main character will make a decision based on one paradigm and then realize that she made a mistake, that there was something completely different happening under the surface. Kind of like in our lives, we think that we have things figured out, especially when we're teenagers. We know everything. And then come to find out that there's this whole other world outside of our house where people do things differently. And that's something that was really a wake-up call for me, going to Taiwan on my mission, interacting with people who have a very different culture, and kind of having that culture shock, realizing that aspects of my culture that I just thought were universal, all people do things this way, are not universal. And so, yeah, I guess the idea of challenging one's beliefs, challenging one's own assumptions, but I wanted to portray religion in a positive light, but also in a realistic light, to see what is it really? Well, it's an institution that, depending on the beliefs of its followers, they may believe it was instituted by God himself, instituted by priests receiving revelations, or it may just be a philosophy that people follow.
Do you find religion is necessary, though?
Do I find it is necessary to life, society?
The masses.
That's an interesting question. I do, but the lawyer in me could make a case for it not being necessary. So I'm a religious person. I see it as vitally important to have this community that is dedicated to these principles. And in my opinion, our religion, we believe in continuing revelation. We believe that God continues to reveal to the leaders of the church things that we need to know to deal with modern problems. But I could just as easily make the case that the element of religion that's so important is that community, having those families and those societies that are interconnected, that can care for one another, that can hold each other to a high standard. I mean, this is classical conservative philosophy. And classical conservative philosophy does not need religion, because the whole idea is that we, at our best of times, we set high standards for ourselves, so that at our weak points, when we're going to do things that we know are bad for us or are bad for the community, there's this pressure that we've put on ourselves and that the community around us puts on us to do things right. And so that's the power of institutions. I still believe religion is necessary, but I can respect someone who disagrees. And this is kind of where I'm going. This is kind of how I conceptualize this series, the other series I'm writing. Trying to put myself in other people's shoes, trying to see things how they would see them if I had different life experiences, and giving credence to different viewpoints. My mentor teacher, Brandon Sanderson, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mistborn series, the Wheel of Time series. He finished the Wheel of Time series. He didn't start it. But he's a fantasy author from Nebraska. He teaches at BYU now, part-time. But he always, whenever you go talk to him about his different characters, he says that he loves to explore different characters' motivations, explore different characters' ideologies, and make them sympathetic. I remember in a Q&A session, he said one thing that he hates about reading some books is that they will have a character whose position he supports that is a straw man, and that is seen as this idiot and always the bumbler with these ridiculous ideas. And so he says that he doesn't want readers to feel like that. He wants readers to feel like whatever their perspective is, it is justified, and that he's not trying to make them up to be a straw man. And I'm following the same principle. I want to. There may be times when certain characters are portrayed a certain way, especially in this series because it's young adult. I try to, like I said, it's the journey of self-discovery. She's discovering things, and she may have preconceptions about someone that are changed through the course of the story. But I do want eventually to show a depth of character to all of the personalities involved, all the philosophies that the characters bring. And I think another author who does this really well is George R. R. Martin with the Song of Ice and Fire.
Besides killing off all of his characters.
And bringing half of them back. But yeah, I think he's a fantastic author. What I really admire about him is that he has this gritty world, and I think a lot of authors admire him for having this gritty fantasy world. But I love the fact that he has characters who are trying to be honorable, trying to do the right thing in the midst of this wretched world around them, and they're often penalized for it. But we love them because they're penalized for doing the right thing. We just really sympathize with that. And I think what he does so well is he'll have this character who's a villain, and you just hate them, like Jaime Lannister. You think he's the scum of the earth, but then later on you start to sympathize. You start to see things from his perspective and realize, wow, he's not such a bad guy after all. He just has a different code of honor. And so that really fascinates me. Getting into other people's heads, that's what has gotten me into writing as well. Trying to understand other people, trying to understand where they're coming from, why we disagree about certain issues, why there are conflicts about politics and religion and ideology, why cultures come into conflict. And I think, ultimately, if we're going to solve the great problems of the world, one step is to understand other people, understand where they're coming from. And I feel a lot of satisfaction in studying and finally understanding, okay, the reason they do this is because they believe this, and this is what shapes their worldview. It's actually my favorite nonfiction author is Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. He is a political psychologist who's written a book called The Righteous Mind. And in The Righteous Mind, he posits this moral foundations theory, that there are 6 moral foundations that are ways that we determine whether something's right or wrong. So they're care, liberty, fairness, authority, loyalty, and sanctity. And so he says when we make moral judgments, when we say something is right or wrong, we're using one or more of these elements. We're saying, well, it's harming someone, therefore it's wrong. But this is where we also come into conflict, because one person may say something that harms someone is wrong. Another person coming from authority may say that something that challenges the social order, which keeps the peace, is wrong. And those may come into conflict when something that harms someone is for the purpose of keeping the peace. And so this is where he claims, and I think he has a lot of good points, this is where conservatives, liberals, and libertarians will clash, because they're coming from different moral foundations. And that really fascinated me. And so when I'm creating my characters, I have to think about, well, okay, I don't always think about it, but sometimes it just pops into my head. I wonder which moral foundation they're coming from when they're doing this.
Good stuff. No, I think that's rather interesting. Sorry, you got your microphone by the speakers. I'm hearing myself. So we talked about your self-publishing. Did we touch on how you started writing? Yeah, I think so. I know you talked about influences with Joss Whedon as well, which is an awesome influence at that. No argument on my part there.
I guess another aspect of my writing, well, I don't know if it's my writing, more like my writing career, I've written 18 novels. So
busy much?
I've tried a lot of different approaches, and there were times when I tried to do it all. I think this is why I love teaching creative writing. If you can see my shirt, MIT D&D Club.
Nice.
Yeah, MIT Academy. So this is the shirt. It's got a griffin on it, because we're the MIT Griffins, and then it's got a natural 20.
So you mean you have a national D&D club? That's awesome.
Oh, it's not national. It's through MIT Academy. We're not affiliated with MIT Tech East. It's a school in Vallejo. I think it's a great school. I teach Mandarin Chinese. I served in Taiwan, so I learned Chinese.
Nice.
I teach Mandarin Chinese there. And also, occasionally, I'll do the Creative Writing Club. And I'll teach kind of just basic lectures on writing. How to start a story. If you're stuck, what do you do? Different elements of storytelling, plot structures. And I found I really enjoy telling students about how to avoid the mistakes I made. I think some of my early errors were trying to please too many people, trying to write to the market, or trying to fit so many different genres. It's like try to keep it under 120,000 words, but also have several viewpoint characters and have a deep, rich setting and have a lot of conflicts. And it just ended up not working out. It took me a while to finally realize you have to dedicate yourself to one thing. And if you're going to have a deep, immersive world, you need to make it longer. If you want to make it shorter, you need to change the number of characters, things like that.
Or kill them
off. Or kill them off.
So then what in terms of being a teacher, obviously, like I just started being a TA for my first year film students. So trying to teach them to write scripts and how to really expand their characters and everything like that. It's challenging. It really is. But what challenges do some of your students face when in the creative writing club?
I've found that one of the biggest challenges they face is writing in detail. So they'll come up with a story, and they will begin writing the story, and they'll send me 3 chapters, but it'll be 6 pages long. And the chapters read like a plot outline. There's not a lot of setting detail. There's not a lot of internal monologue. Things just kind of happen. It's like bam, bam, bam. And I tell them, whoa, slow down. This is great for a plot outline, but think about the characters. Once again, this goes back to my philosophy of writing, which I kind of borrowed from David Farland. If you've heard of David Farland, he does The Daily Kick. He's done a bunch of different novels. But he says that you always start with the setting. And it seems, for a beginning writer, it seems counterintuitive for a lot of them. They say, well, the story is about the plot. You have a story of, a terrorist who tries to assassinate the president. That's what the story is about. And so you plot it out, and then you come up with characters. But what I found that Farland's approach to go setting, characters, plot, lets you develop things organically. So, for example, I have a setting. I have this Scandinavian setting where I have beasts of the forest that have plagued mankind, monsters plagued mankind for centuries. The angels have fought them back. And you have these small towns, and then there's this magic system. So I come up with the setting, the magic, the geography, the history, the social organizations, the kings and courts and religion. And so you have all these elements, and then from there the characters come out of that. So if I have for example, this city of Kaybree is on the border by the forest, and it has border patrol men who are patrolling to watch for signs of the monsters before they attack. So they're kind of on the edge of the civilized world. And then the Vormund Order is the main character's mother's organization that fights against the angels, the beasts of the forest, defends mankind. And so if I have this organization, well, I have to create the person who's in charge of it. I have to create the people surrounding them. The main character goes to sort of this preparatory school for nobles. And so I have to come up with teachers. Who are the teachers? Well, they're the sages. They're the religious leaders. And so then you branch off from that. She has classmates. So I have to create, I create classmates and think, okay, what kind of classmates would she have? There's a tavern called the Bard Song, and it has characters that come out of that, and what kind of characters would come out of that. So with settings, and maybe, this is the philosopher in me going back to Heidegger, you have thrownness. The character comes out of their setting. They're thrown into this situation, and that determines a lot of who they are. And I found that to be really successful for me in creating organic characters that feel real. Because they're coming out of a setting, they have a family, they have a place that society, a place in society, or that society tells them they need to be. They have a religion, or they have different beliefs about the world. They have opinions. They have a profession. They have hopes and dreams, which are based in the world. They're not going to dream of being an airline pilot because that hasn't been invented yet. And so then after the characters, you have these people who have human passions and failings and ambitions, and then they run into each other. You have them just go start doing things they want to do, and when they come into conflict, there's your plot.
So you build the world first, basically, and then you go from there. That's a good way to start. It's an interesting approach. Usually, you're right. People start ass backwards. Awesome stuff. What about conventions or book fairs or speaking engagements? Do you do any of that type of stuff? Spreading the word of not only your novels but your knowledge as well.
So oftentimes I will go to writers' conventions. I've been to several. 3 of them were a World Fantasy Con, and so that's kind of the main professional convention for you writers out there. If you want to get published professionally through agents and editors, I would suggest meeting up with people and getting to know them at World Fantasy Con. It's sort of the con for professionals. There are maybe like 1,000 to 1,200 people there, and so there's a lot better chance that you'll be one-on-one with an agent or editor. You'll get to talk to them, as they're in the break rooms or the lounges, and you get to approach them as a professional, not as a fan. And so it can be a really great experience. You can even, I've taken several authors out to lunch, at different times, and just said, "Hey, I'll take you out to lunch and just give me a chance to ask you some questions about the profession." And the authors I've approached have been very open to that, and it's given me some great insight on how to be a writer, on the professional culture. So I've been to World Fantasy Con a few times, World Science Fiction Con once, and then there's some local conventions that can be helpful. Mainly it's about networking. If you network with people, I actually met Steven Savage at a convention. It was Kentucky Con up in Sacramento, and he was the one guy they had doing the writing track at the Anime Con. And I went to it, and it was fun. He had some interesting ideas and activities that we did. And so I'm just keeping in contact with other professionals can help you get opportunities. Also, at my school or wherever people show interest, I hand out business cards. So I've created a business card for my series, specifically for Kaybre versus the Angels. And the first book, here you go. The first book I'm giving away for free. And this is kind of going into my marketing strategy. I'm reading a book right now by David Gaughran called Let's Get Visible. He's got 2 books about self-publishing, at least 2. Let's Get Digital, Let's Get Visible. And he talks about publishing ebooks on Amazon and how to make it work, how to make it successful. And he has some great advice. So if you check that out, that would be really useful for self-publishing authors who are going into ebooks. But this is one of the approaches that he mentions, giving away 1 book or 1 short story for free to give people a feel for your series, and then having links at the end, for example, to your mailing list, to your other books, to a place where they can leave reviews, to your Facebook page, all these different links at the end to say, hey, here's how you can connect with me, here's how you can hear about new releases, here are the other books in the series, or other books I've written. So essentially, this is a marketing tool. The book itself is a marketing tool, and I'm giving it away in hopes that people will read it, will tell their friends about it, and then will buy the other books.
Very interesting.
And so it's starting, it's kind of working. The sales are trickling in, like little by little. So we'll see what happens. There are a number of other approaches he mentions, like going on to BookBub and these other websites to get your book promoted, paying for promotions, advertising. Interviews, yeah. But it's a long process. You have to build a readership. And I think that's the main issue that self-publishing authors face. Trying to get noticed, trying to get the reputation, and getting people interested, getting it to its right target audience.
It takes time.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, it's nothing's easy whatsoever. Nothing gets handed to you. It's all hard work.
Yeah. And even professionally published authors through Tor or one of the big publishers will have to do. I've heard them say they have to do a lot of work themselves on marketing because that's how they get the following. They have to keep it up. They have, just having a big name isn't enough, especially in the digital computer and internet age. You have to be out there at least some of the time promoting and doing those things necessary to get people to know what you're doing.
It's a full-time job.
Yeah, it is.
It's another full-time job, I should say.
Another full-time job.
Yeah. Is there anything that I haven't touched upon that you'd like to let everyone else know about? Because we'll have you tell us your websites and all that at the end here.
No, I think we've kind of covered it all.
Cool, awesome. So then, what is the amazing website we can go to see all of your work and maybe even purchase some of your books too?
So you can go to Amazon. I have an author page on Amazon. You can go to Amazon and type in Kaybre versus the Angels, and you can find everything from there. Also, www.harrison-paul.com is my official website, and I update it with I have all of blog posts just about updates to the series, updates to writing, sometimes my thoughts on writing, and also my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/HarrisonPaulAuthor, and I have a Twitter account, Harrison Grimm, where I post news about the book and also funny quotes from high school students. My sister, she's 15. She's hilarious. She'll say things that you can't make this stuff up. It's pretty funny. So one time she was talking about her history class, and she was talking something about Russia, and I said, yeah, totalitarianism, and she said, oh, that's how you say it. I thought it was total Aryanism. I just say, really?
Should make that into a book.
There we go. And I have an account on Wattpad and on Goodreads. Also, the books are available on Barnes & Noble, Sony, Kobo, Amazon, Apple, a number of other places. I always welcome constructive criticism. I always welcome comments. I love getting reviews from readers because it gives me insight. Like this whole book project, this isn't about this project making me into a published author. I think for me, this is the long-term goal of learning, getting experience publishing, and getting my work out there, seeing what people think of it, seeing if I can hit a target audience. And if I can't, what am I lacking? What can I do to change in my next series that might get it published with a professional publisher, that might get it to be very successful on Amazon? And so it's a learning experience for me.
I think it's interesting. I like the fact that it has a lot of interesting characters, and especially with the way you've twisted the religious aspect and the points of view, and in terms of how you've described it in this interview has been rather intriguing. So I think I may have to pick up that first book there and see where it leads me.
All right. Well, thanks, Kurt.
No problem. I hate to say it, but that ends this episode. Sorry. It has to end sometime, unfortunately. But thank you, Harrison, for coming.
Thank you so much. And it's been great. We'll keep in contact, Kurt.
Definitely. And, that ends this episode of TGT. Of course, this was episode 327. We have more interviews coming up this weekend. I believe Liz Staley from Drastic's Comics. She's been on the show in the past. She'll be on the show talking about her newest book, dealing with how to master Manga Studio, the digital software that's been fully licensed by Smith Micro. So that's the very first how-to Manga Studio that's out there. So she'll be talking about that interesting experience being a comic author, being a comic artist and author, writing a book, a how-to book on Manga Studio. That's a great transition, I think. And she was very successful with that as well. She's a wonderful person. So thank you everyone for listening and watching to this show. Of course, you can get this show on iTunes just search for TGT Media. You can go onto the website, tgtmedia.com. You can, of course, email me, kurt@tgtmedia.com if you have any questions or if you'd like to get on the show as well. There is a suggest interview button, menu item on the TGT website. So please fill it out. It takes 2 seconds of your busy day and get on the show and talk about what you love yourself. And everyone else will listen to it because they have to. And have a great night, everyone.